cells and excreted out their antennas. So here we're seeing the very first stages of the egg. The queen, when she's ready to lay eggs, she'll go on a whole frame and start laying in one area. We have, and I'll bring the hive in next week, we'll go over that so you'll understand that, but there's 10 frames in a box, some cases there's 8 if that's the equipment you choose to use. But in the middle frames is where she's laying the eggs. And in this case here, you see multiple eggs. That's a sign that the workers could be laying. So if the hive becomes queenless and they haven't replaced the queen, then this is what laying workers. And what do we know about when workers try to lay eggs? Those eggs are not fertilized and they won't develop into worker bees. So this is a sign that the colony is in desperate need of help, and sometimes just requeening is not going to help that, but we'll talk about that one a little later too. Okay, so the eggs, we saw the eggs. This is cereal jelly or the bee bread that we're talking about. You can see that pool of translucent liquid, and that larva is feeding off that. When the larva gets better, you can see how white it is. You can see the sections and how healthy that looks. And then these here are capped over. I have a better picture of that. See how they're starting to get capped over in this section here, and then in this one again you see cap. That's all the pupa stage, and I'll show. I think I have a frame here. This frame, you can see here, this is what we call a medium frame. This is a little queen cell on the bottom right there, start of one right there. But notice how flat that is, nice and flat. That's all worker brood. So in the middle frames, you will see all your frames will look like this once they're capped over. And then on the outer frames, won't change it on me. Again, cap brood, and then you have honey right here, a nice flat cap brood there, this here is drones. That's all drone, and I have another picture here that. Now you can see the drones on the outside in the corners, and then this is all your worker brood. So if your queen is laying and you have the middle 5 frames, they're all workers, and then maybe around the edges. So if this was a frame that I was holding, sometimes you see drones along the edges. And then as you get to the outside frames, there's more drones. So the one thought there is that the queen is trying to, or the bees are trying to keep everything in the middle because that's their priority. If it gets cold out, and they don't have enough bees to keep everything warm, at least they'll keep the middle warm, and then they don't care if they sacrifice the drones on the outside. They don't care. And it's an issue like in your colder spring, like March and April. not such an issue in May and June when the weather gets warmer. So, let me see. Oh, you've got to be kidding. Oh, there we go. Now it wants to work. I need to kick it. So we got larva and pupa. So we got the eggs. When you're going into a hive and you're looking at a hive, you want to see all three of these. A lot of beekeepers will say, well, I'm going through my hive, I got to find the queen. You don't have to find the queen. You have to see evidence of the queen. And so you want to see all stages. And if you see larva and you see pupa stages, but you don't see eggs, no eggs, what does that tell you? That either you're not seeing the eggs, they're there and you're not seeing them, which can happen with new beekeepers until you're used to picking it out, or that queen has not been laying for 3 days. If you see all cap brood, and so if you see all cap brood, then if we're seeing just this, and we're not seeing any eggs or larvae, that means that not only for 3 days, but the additional 6 days that it's a larva, the queen has not laid. So now you have 3 plus 6, 9 days that there's been no queen laying in the colony. So these are things that as a beekeeper, and this is what we'll discuss and this is what we'll teach you, is when these conditions happen, what do we do? And why is it happening? And so one of the reasons that it could be happening is this. These are queen cells. These are old queen cells. This is the start of a queen cell, and these here are queen cells.
Why do they have so many?
All right, so we're gonna get into, and this is a large. So why are there queen cells? So if a colony will make queen cells for 3 different reasons. We'll start off the first one right here. It says here, emergency queen cells. Somehow the queen dies. It could be that when I'm going through the hive, I don't see her. I place the frame down. I crush the queen. I'm pulling out a frame. I'm not careful. There's a lot of bees in there. I don't see her, and I kill her as a beekeeper, right? And that can happen. Or the queen can simply just get old and sick, and she can die. So when the bees notice that the queen is gone, there's no pheromones throughout that hive. They'll start acting differently. When I normally pick up a frame on a nice warm day, the bees are nice and calm on that frame. If they start running around the frames, it's either that they're agitated that I'm opening them up and they're not responding well to that, or it could be when you start pulling them out and they're all running around that they could be queenless. So when the bees get into this emergency situation, they're going to have some eggs and some larvae in the hive. So in order for them to make a queen, they have to be able to identify that they're queenless, and then they have to start feeding that 3-day-old egg or first-day-old larva. That's the premium time where you want that egg larva to be fed so that it gets enough nourishment and it grows larger and develops well so that it'll develop into a good queen. These here are smaller and they're not well developed like this one is. You can see that they point downward. We call it like a peanut hanging there. Yes? Is a queen?
Does she continuously lay eggs? Like for how long does she?
Yes. So the question is about the queens laying of the eggs. So queens in the summertime, in real good conditions with a nice population of bees, can lay up to 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day. So remember that those bees, right, they're dying off in 5 to 6 weeks. Well, if that's the case, then we got to replace them. So it's got to be a continual cycle. And that's why each step is so important. Because if the queen stops laying for 3 days, there's no eggs. Now it's starting to become a problem. Now, if there's no larva, she hasn't been laying for 9 days, we know that population is going to start going down. So when we inspect a colony, because it's 3, 6, and 12 days, I'm talking about workers, 12 days in the pupa stage, 3 eggs, 6 larvae, 12 pupa. So that's about 2/3 of your brood area is going to be in the pupa stage, and then the others. So the longer that goes on, the more of a problem it's going to be. So when a hive goes queenless, the hive or the beekeeper has to correct that situation pretty quickly. And so how quickly kind of depends on the population. Yes?
I thought you said that the queen, when she's laying the eggs, fertilizes it, and that determines whether it'll be that falls. So then, but now you're saying that if they lose the queen, they can feed differently in the cells to help try to generate it.
Right.
How does that work?
So let me explain that a little better, because I don't think I explained it well. So when the queen lays an egg and fertilizes it, we know that that's going to be a female. Where she places that, if she places it into these cells here, it's going to be a worker, unless the bees start chewing this area out, which they probably did here, and then built a queen cell there. In this case here, the bees are trying to make an emergency cell, so that's what they're doing. They're taking an egg that was laid there. If she doesn't fertilize it, we know that's going to be a drone. And you don't want to see a situation where you have half drone, half worker. You want to see 95% worker. So
So the workers then could actually create multiple if they decide
yes, so
to
in the case of emergency, these are 3 separate situations that we're going to explain. In emergency, there won't be that many queen cells. That many meaning there'll probably be less than 8 to 10. In a lot of cases, there's only 5 or 6. And you know, in a situation like this, you might see it in one frame or a couple of frames. And so those queens, because the bees can start to choose an older larva to feed, those might not develop, and they don't build the cell big enough. They're not going to develop into a good queen. So those are inferior queens, super emergency. Now supersedure. Supersedure is a situation where the bees feel that the queen may be getting older, her pheromones might not be as strong. The eggs and larvae, they give off pheromones. That's another area of the hive. They're giving out pheromones to attract the bees to come feed them. So if there's not a lot of eggs and larvae in the hive, the bees might blame that on the queen and decide that they have to supersede her. In that case, a mother and a daughter, if this queen if this supersedure queen emerges, a mother and daughter can coexist in the same hive. So years ago, I'm a member of Essex County Beekeepers, and we set up the Topsfield Fair, and we have observation hives. We have a real nice bee building there. And one year, I decided to bring in an observation hive, which I kind of bring in half the hives that they have that they show there anyways. But one of them had 2 queens in it. And one of the members got mad at me. He said, "You're confusing the beekeepers. You're confusing the people and making them believe that there's 2 queens in a hive." I said, "Well, there can be." So what, you don't want to tell everybody the whole truth? I mean, there can be. My uncle, one time, I told him I was going through a hive when I was probably had been keeping bees for 2 or 3 years. And I said, "Hey, I have a hive with 2 queens in it." He goes, "No, you don't." I said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Come on, I'll bring you out there." And we both started going through the hive, and I was on one side, and he was on the other, and we were going through the frames, and at the same time, we both said, "I got the queen." And we looked at each other and looked at the frames, and sure enough, the 2 queens were there. And so then I picked the queen up and I put her onto the frame, and the 2 queens walked right up to each other, and then they walked right away from each other. So it makes sense, right? In nature, what mother kills her daughter? I don't know. Maybe there is, but what's that? Yeah. We won't go down there. So so they will coexist. And the thing is, if you mark those 2 queens different colors, so we can mark queens. There's 5 colors that we can mark queens. This queen here has a red dot on her. And in your book, they will have a color code. And they'll tell you, like, in years ending in 0 and 6, it's one color, and 1 and 7, it's another, whatever it is. But the colors are red, green, yellow, blue, and white. And so this year, if the beekeepers stay to that, because some people just mark it any color, but if you stay to that code, this year's yellow. And so I marked those 2 queens, and I've done it many times since, and sometimes the daughter queen will stay in the hive, and sometimes the mother queen will stay in the hive. And then I've seen them coexist up to 6 months in the same hive. So, lots of different things. And so why do the bees do this? They do it a lot in the spring and a lot in the fall. Because as you're going into the winter, they might say, well, we're not sure if this queen's going to be, good enough to get us into next spring. And in the spring, they're saying, well, we don't know, if this queen is good enough to take us through the season. So they, and I'm guessing, obviously I don't know what they're thinking, but so they're going to produce another second queen, a supersedure queen. And now when they do that, again, not a lot of cells, and again in probably that 8 to 12 range, but they're usually going to be very well defined, and they're going to be fed so at the proper time. So these queens can be more than adequate for as far as quality. Yes.
So on the left, you've got your emergency queens, but they will hatch into queens who can produce eggs, even though they're not.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. So we'll get into. I'll jump way ahead. If that was my hive, I'm destroying all those cells. I'm cutting them right out. I'm reaching into my pocket where I keep my queens in the summertime, and I have one in a cage, and I'm going to pop out the candy, the cork, and expose the candy end, and I'm going to put that new mated queen into that hive. And then the bees will chew through this candy that you have in a plug. It'd take them 3 or 4 days, but in the meantime, they're getting the pheromones from that queen, and when you slowly release, maybe they will accept her. Maybe they will, and maybe they won't. They have their own mind, and they will do what they want to do. We can only ask. So, as a beekeeper, if you're requeening a hive, it doesn't work all the time. Yes?
Do people like yourself keep mated queens available throughout the summer for people who run into emergencies?
Commercial beekeepers, yes. Yeah. Now, normally, if you're keeping 1 or 2 hives, you're not going to have those resources, but that's what we do at the, at our business. So we keep queens in stock. If anybody, there's different reasons to purchase a queen. You could want to start a new hive. You might need a replacement queen, or there's different reasons why you would buy a queen. Yes.
Just quickly, so let's say if you were to cut off, instead of cutting them all off, what if you were to cut off the gimpy ones, for lack of a better word?
Yep.
And just keep the one that looks like the strongest?
Like this one?
Yeah, for example, so would that mean that there's a better chance that would be a strong queen?
Okay, did everybody hear that question? Would I just cut out these and keep maybe the best one and let that go? Okay, so if I didn't have a queen in my pocket, I would do that. However, there's a second piece to that. Remember that chart we were looking at? Okay, so that chart said that it takes 16 days for a queen to hatch out. And then after that, that queen is going to be fed and mature and gain strength for probably at least a week. Then she's going to fly out to get mated. It's a dangerous flight for a honeybee. There's predators. There's birds, there's spiders, there's dragonflies, there's anything that might grab them while they're out trying to fly, and they might never make it back to the hive. So that's a situation that could happen. So, and the quicker I get a queen, especially the one in my pocket is already mated, the quicker that hive's going to come back. So I might save myself 2 or 3 weeks by requeening. But if I'm not in a hurry, and I have 3 or 4 hives, and that's just one hive, and I might want to say, okay, I'm going to let them make, that queen cell doesn't look too bad, and she probably produce an okay queen. You never know. And it's a learning experience. And you just kind of wait and see what happens. Yes?
Would you say during soup procedure that they make 8 to 12?
Yes.
Cells?
Yeah.
So what if like 5 of those queens come out and then they mate? How do they?
Yeah, that's something I should address. Thank you. So, what we're going to talk about in the next one is swarming. Okay. Again, emergency, supersedure, and swarming. The only thing they have in common is they're all queen cells. The way the bees act is completely different in each situation. So to your point, again, I'm going to go back to my friend Dave Tarpey and some of the studies that he did, is, remember I said the queens fly out, they mate multiple times, right? So their genetics are going to be diverse. The bees can identify the different genetics in the hive, and they will try to influence their genetics if they know that queen's carrying their genetics. So in a supersedure cell, they might go and destroy. The bees themselves might go and destroy those cells. And in the end, where you might start off with 8 or 12, you might only end up with 3. and then it's less competition. But generally, from my experience, and they don't write it in the book, but from my experience, it's that when it comes to supersedure, there is only going to be 1 or 2 queens, and there's not going to be a lot of fighting to see what the dominant queen is. Did that answer your question? Okay. So let me just jump in and tell you a little bit about swarming, because this one is, 90% of. If the bees are in a situation where there's a great weather outside, the colony, it has a nice population, they're bringing in lots of resources, and then the bees, what they'll do is now make multiple queen cells, and this could be over 20 queen cells. And they'll look kind of like this on the bottom of the frame. Look at all these queen cells here, right? And this is where the old queen, the mother queen, before these queens hatch out, she'll fly away, and half the population will follow her. That's called a swarm. And so now, when these queens all start to emerge, now there's fighting. There's fighting amongst those queens. They go and they'll travel to all the other cells, and they'll try to either kill or sting the queen as another one's coming out, or they'll try to sting through the cell and try to kill that queen. And they'll keep doing that until there's only 1 queen left in the colony. Now, what else can happen is that the queen will swarm, and maybe there's a virgin queen that is emerging as the bees are swarming. She could jump in with that and fly away with that swarm. So it's not uncommon to see a swarm with a virgin queen and a mother queen. Secondly, let's say that first swarm leaves, and then the next day one of these virgin queens comes out and says, you know what, I'm not into this fight to the death thing, I'm out of here. And a group of bees will follow her. Now that first primary swarm might be from this big, from top to bottom. And then all of a sudden you see this smaller swarm. That's what we call secondary swarms. So if you are a beekeeper and you see all these cells, all capped, so they're in the final stages, and you can't find the queen, maybe she's already swarmed, you're much better off destroying all the cells and leaving like three of your best queen cells, so you won't lose population with what we call secondary swarms or after swarms. So if the population gets too small, then it'll be harder to bring that colony back. It'll just take more time. And we have a short season. Our bees, in some years, I've been doing this for a long time, I have seen the bees start foraging as early as the end of February. They're very rare, but I have seen it. I've also seen other years where they basically can't be, they might get 3 or 4 or 5 days in the whole month of April, never mind March. So if that situation happens, and then we have a frost in October, now you got a colony of bees that are not bringing in food from October, November, December, January, February, March, 6 months that they have no new food coming into the colony. And then it's colder weather, which is more stressful on them. So it's harder for them to start restoring that population. As the days get longer, and we have more sunlight during the day, the queen will start laying. And if we have a large population, she'll have enough bees so that maybe she can lay brood in 3 or 4 frames. But if we have a small population, then she might only be able to lay a brood area of this much. And it will take a lot longer for that colony to gain strength. So we'll talk about management techniques when we get to that point too. Yes?
Is there different types of bee species, right? Honeybee species for queens, or?
Yeah. Sure, I can talk to that. So there are different types of species of bees. Our honeybees here that we manage are called Apis mellifera. Those are basically your European honeybees. There's Apis cerana, which is Asian honeybees. You have Africanized honeybees. So with us, we're doing European honeybees, but within the European honeybees, there's different subspecies. We have Italians, Carnolians. We have breeds that we've crossbreeded. Buckfast is one of them. There was a monk in the abbey in England that worked and developed his own line of bees, and that was called Buckfast. There's the Italian bee is mainly from the warmer climates. Golden in color, and then darker ones are usually from the colder climates. They can be Carnolians or Russians. And then obviously the next question is, well, the book says that, Italians are calmer, and, this bee is more aggressive, and so a long time ago I started saying, hey, I don't racially profile my bees. I'm very inclusive, and it's like saying, a certain race is faster, or a better basketball player, or a better hockey player, or that. No, you put the queen in the hive and you see. And I find all bees to be calm. And I say it's mostly how we treat them as beekeepers, and that is by using smoke, which we'll show you, and controlling the pheromones. And one thing my uncle told me is my lesson number 1, which I never forgot, and I always will remember. And every time I get stung, I just kick myself and say, slow down, be relaxed, be slow. The bees don't like if you go, oh, there's a queen, bang, you're going to get nailed right on the hand. It's like, you take everything, like in a very calm and slow and deliberate manner. A lot of people say women make better beekeepers than men because of that. They will be more gentle with a hive. When I go down, we get bees in Georgia, and because